Mm.
You have to engage in carrying your cross, in walking the walk, in entering through the narrow gate, in going through the phases of what Jesus went through when he said, "Follow me." It wasn't follow me as a superstar or as a social media influencer. He was follow me means walk in my steps, walk in the steps that I've taken. Just by, sitting in a church and claiming that I accept Christ as my personal savior and that's it. That for me is the least, let me say, it's missing the whole reason why Jesus came. And this is my urge. This is what the awakening that I'm calling for. We need to reclaim the consciousness that he lived and wanted us to live so that we could really manifest real peace, justice, and equality in the world we live in.
Hey, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. We're glad you're tuning into this episode. We are a viewer and listener supported podcast, so we really appreciate you listening, watching on YouTube. We really encourage you to subscribe to whatever platform you're using. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, or if you're on Apple or however you listen to a podcast, be sure and subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. Also, make comments if you like it and share it if you like it. We really need people to make comments and share the episodes that you like. And then also, if you're not already a supporter, we really would encourage you to go to spiritualityadventures.com and you can pick a tier, and we have bonus content for every type of giver. This is a nonprofit, so they're tax-deductible donations, but we do provide bonus content for those who are supporters. So be a part of the team, help support Spirituality Adventures, and we're so glad you're tuning into this episode. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Spirituality Adventures. I am so excited to interview for a second time on Spirituality Adventures, Sami Awad. And Sami joined us about a year ago. He is can I say activist, nonviolent activist from the
That's
West
how I
Bank,
introduce myself exactly.
a Palestinian activist, basically his whole life. I mean, he started so young. His uncle is known as the Gandhi of the West Bank, and he started out with his uncle protesting nonviolently the occupation of the West Bank. And we met through a common friend several years ago, maybe at the National Prayer Breakfast. I can't remember exactly, but then I've visited him in the West Bank and visited his family. Some of his family have been at my old church at Vineyard, where he preached, and hung out with some of his family here in Kansas City. I am honored to have you on the
Well, don't
podcast
forget,
again.
born in Kansas City as well.
That's right. You were born in Kansas City, and he's a KU grad.
Yes, and a
Yes.
Chiefs fan as
And a
well.
Chiefs fan, which we've started off with a very disappointing start to our season this year. Yes.
Very, very.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I was hoping maybe your daughter would come to KU, but she went to San Francisco University instead, right? So,
I was hoping as well. But my nephew and my niece are studying at KU.
are they?
Even though my brother studied at K-State, they decided to go to KU. So that's a
See,
proud people.
if you come to Kansas City, you got to let me know, because we got to hang out again. I found a
Yeah.
good hookah place here in Kansas City too. I usually only do hookah with you, but anyway.
Okay.
So, but yeah, Sami, thanks again for being on the podcast again. Um, Give us a quick, for the audience who's just tuning in, that doesn't even know you, give us a quick overview, because I want to get in. Sami has just published a new book called The Sacred Awakening, Reclaiming Christ Consciousness. And I've got 4 pages of notes on this book, Sami. So I really want to dive into this with you.
Yeah.
But before we do that, just give a quick overview of your life, like a 5 minute, and your work with the Nonviolent International group that you're working with right now.
Yeah. So yeah, as you said, my name is Sami Awad. I am a Palestinian and I am an activist, a person that has committed his life to peace and justice in the Holy Land, in what we call Palestine and Israel. My whole journey and my work has been to address the issues of injustice that we face as a Palestinian community living there. And as I am very aware, your listeners are very much aware of the news of what's happening to the Palestinians these days, especially the last 2 years in Gaza, where my mother's family is from. I still have distant family members that live in Gaza until today, Christians that live there. And of course, where I live in Bethlehem in the West Bank. It's a very, very difficult and violent situation that we are living in. But with all of this, I still believe in nonviolence as the way to move forward, to resist occupation and to dismantle oppression and to bring peace and justice to both Palestinians and Israelis. As you said, this has been my life journey since I was 12. I grew up in a family that's always been committed to peace and reconciliation. My grandmother, after her husband was killed in the 1948 war by Jewish forces, insisted that as a family we will never seek revenge and retaliation. This is a big part of her faith journey, and that we should proactively seek peace with our enemies and justice with our enemies. I also grew up in a very Christian evangelical setting. My father is the founder of the Bethlehem Bible College, which is the only institute to train Palestinian Christian leaders. My uncle Alex is a Baptist minister who retired. He used to run the East Jerusalem Baptist Church. Now he's in the US. So a lot of background between Christianity and Palestinianism and activism. For 25 years, I was director of an organization called the Holy Land Trust, an organization committed to nonviolent resistance, leadership development, and collective trauma healing, which I believe is a big reason why we are in the situation we are in. Palestinians and Israelis are deeply embedded in ancient historic traumas that have shaped their identity and how they view the other. But recently, I stepped down from Holland Trust after 25 years and joined another organization called Nonviolence International, spreading the message of nonviolent activism, again, trauma healing, and developing visionary leaders in different parts of the world beyond the work that I just did in Palestine. Of course, I live in Palestine, in Bethlehem. I still continue to do the work there, but also expanding it to a more international audience because the world is in trouble everywhere, not just in the Holy Land where I live.
Mm, 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 mm. So, thank you, Sammy. An honor to have you on again. Yeah, we've hung out in Washington, D.C., in Kansas City,
Hmm.
and in the West Bank
Bethlehem, yeah,
at Bethlehem. Yeah. And
yeah,
I think we've done hookah at all three places. I don't know. Anyway.
I think so. Yes.
All right. Well, your book, Sacred Awakening, Reclaiming Christ Consciousness. So, I thoroughly enjoyed the read, especially having known you for, I don't know, over a decade anyway.
Mm,
And yeah, your first statement was like, I had to leave Christianity to find Jesus.
yes.
Let's start with that one.
Yeah.
Give us what do you mean by that?
Yeah, it is not an easy statement to say, and I think part of me was just wanted to put it out there from the beginning and and
Right.
and pass by it. But for me, my journey in life has been really to ask questions, and one of the questions coming from a conflict area, from a situation of so much violence, is really asking the question, what would Jesus do? I love Jesus. I love his teachings. I love how he provoked, how he engaged, how he taught, his message, his calling to his followers to love your enemy is something that no other prophet or shaman or you name it have said. Make peace with your enemy, be kind to your enemy, have compassion to your enemy, but to love the enemy is something very, very unique. And so my journey has been to really discover Jesus. And And like many people, sadly, I would say, in our seeking to discover Jesus, we were always blocked by the church, by the dogma, by the doctrine of the church, by institutions that had just a certain theological framework, and you just simply had to abide by this framework, and everything was fine. In a sense, salvation is it. Just believe in Jesus, and it doesn't matter what happens on this earth, just as long as you believe in Jesus and you accept him as your savior, then when you die, you'll go to heaven. Well, I just couldn't keep buying into that argument because Jesus was much more than just salvation. Jesus was a teacher, he was a rabbi. He engaged with community. He has amazing, powerful teachings that were never taught to me, I would say, in my context growing up in Christianity, other than him being the Son of God, and he has amazing words to say and did miracles here and there, and we have to worship him because he did these extra natural miracles and activities that made him beyond human. Um but like for example, uh, Jesus talked about the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God is at hand. In Matthew, there's this verse where if you ask the question, what did Jesus do every day? He walked through the Galilee. He taught the kingdom of God and he healed the illnesses, proclaimed the kingdom. Like he was every day in his 3 year ministry, he was proclaiming what does that mean? Uh, what does it mean to love the enemy? What does it mean to be a peacemaker? So these are questions I began to ask, and I realized at one point that for me to really discover Jesus and his teachings, I had to completely step out of Christianity. I had to step out of the institute that I would say today, and I say this with a broken heart, is the institute which is very, very similar to the institute that he was rejecting during his time. An institute built on hierarchy, built on who's in and who's out, built on domination, built on fear, built on control. And sadly, I say this, the church has become the thing that he had rejected. And so for me to discover him, I had to consciously to step out of that whole environment. And as I share, to even mourn my experience there and to really let go and to begin to read Jesus. And I began to read him completely independent of the doctrine and the dogma and the teachings of the church. And in that, I discovered amazing things in reading Jesus independent and really meditating and reflecting on it. I discovered a man who really had a path for all of us as humans, how to truly live peace on this earth.
Mm.
What he called the kingdom of God being manifested here and now. And that led me to go deeper into it, and I was sharing more. I think even when I spoke in your church, I kind of shared a little bit on that. And then it was people like you and other people who would say, "Well, you need to, where's the book? You need to, where's the book? Where's the book?" And it took me some time, but at the end, I compiled all of this in this book.
Yes, The Sacred Awakening. I really want to encourage you to get it, read it, study it. Good stuff. Yeah, I had two thoughts when you were sharing that. One, I interviewed John Dominic Crossan on my podcast a while back, and he, through all of his studies of first century, he thinks Jesus is the first person to practice nonviolent resistance to empire, and he's a great historian, you know.
Mhm.
I thought that was fascinating to think about that from a historical perspective. And then, yeah, the other thing was maybe, you know, that evangelical idea of salvation is like a ticket to eternal life after you die. But if we round out that idea of salvation as a holistic shalom peacemaker, which
Yeah.
is where your book is leading us to the peacemaker as being the kind of the like where the whole beatitudes are leading us. I found that fascinating, to just think about those
Yeah.
things.
So the way I look at salvation, it's like somebody claiming that they won the race without running it, without putting the effort, without training, without practicing, without engaging. Just by saying I won the race, you don't win the race. Claiming that you won the race, claiming that, again, accepting Christ as your personal savior means this is it. That would be very, very disappointing to Jesus, because Jesus taught his followers to follow his teachings. That's what he did. He was a teacher. He did not come as a messianic prophet with just one message, which is believe in me, accept me as your Messiah, and you will enter heaven. There isn't anywhere in the Gospels that mentions any of this. He came with very clear teachings, and teachings are to be implemented, to be lived out. And what's very beautiful is actually him as a teacher lived out the teachings that he was teaching. So when we talk about the Beatitudes, he actually lived and experienced each of the Beatitudes in his life. So he was a practitioner of what he was teaching. And so for me, I say, if you still believe in salvation and the doctrine of salvation, and this is key part of your life, I'm fine with it. I'm not going to argue, but take the whole package.
Mm.
You have to engage in carrying your cross, in walking the walk, in entering through the narrow gate, in going through the phases of what Jesus went through when he said, "Follow me." It wasn't follow me as a superstar or as a social media influencer. He was follow me means walk in my steps, walk in the steps that I've taken. And at the end, yes, maybe that is the reward that you will get. But I really believe, and I know this is going to trigger many, many people, just by, sitting in a church and claiming that I accept Christ as my personal savior, and that's it. That for me is the least, let me say, it's missing the whole reason why Jesus came. And if we miss the whole reason why Jesus came, then maybe your salvation is not where it's supposed to be. And I would challenge people and say, go back, do the work that Jesus taught his followers to do, and then if salvation is your thing at the end, then let it be so. And the reality is that if we actually do what Jesus taught us to do, we would be in a much better place now, not just within the church, but I think in the world itself, because his message was a message to everybody. He taught his message to everybody, not a select group of people. He did with the Samaritans, he did with the Canaanites, he taught his message to everybody. And if we did that, lived the message and taught it the same way he did, then I really, really believe we would be in peace in this world. And this is my urge. This is what the awakening that I'm calling for. We need to reclaim the consciousness that he lived and wanted us to live so that we could really manifest real peace, justice, and equality in the world we live in.
Make it so, Lord. Make it so. Yeah, thank you. So, your chapter 2, you dive into consciousness because the subtitle is Reclaiming Christ Consciousness. Okay, and so you lay out some paradigms for consciousness, and I'm kind of curious because I noticed you the way you footnoted was you put in brackets like maybe a book and an author, and through in a few places in your book, but like you mentioned, I want to lay out the framework for consciousness as you're thinking about it. Like, because you mentioned collective consciousness. Of course, I immediately think of Jung when we talk about that. And then you talked about prevailing consciousness, which you define as patriarchy, separation, domination, judgment, exclusion, scarcity, violence, ego-centered. Then you talk about Christ consciousness, which is unity with the divine. And then you talk about kingdom consciousness, which is a different set of values than prevailing consciousness, which involves compassion, justice, forgiveness, humility, nonviolence, radical inclusion, equality, mutuality, love. So I'm curious where you came up with, because,
Yeah.
I mean, from an evolutionary perspective, one of the things that puzzles even atheist neuroscientists is this evolving consciousness that we have going on. And what is that? This Homo sapien evolving consciousness,
Yes.
And so I'm curious, how your whole paradigm of consciousness there, collective, prevailing, Christ, and kingdom.
Yeah.
And give us a
So
little backdrop for how you came
yeah.
up with those paradigms. Yeah. Did it come
So
from Buddhism? Did it come from Christianity? Did it come from Christ? Did it come from, yeah.
it came from Jesus. It really came. I mean, and a big part of my book, as you probably noticed, I don't bring references outside of Christianity and of Jesus. All the texts that I refer to are gospel texts, the references of Jesus. I don't talk about the lost years of Jesus. I don't talk about, that these messages came to me through some hallucinations of Mother Mary or some disciple coming to me at night and whispering in my ear, like what many people have said they've experienced. I don't create stories outside of the content of, especially the Gospels. Let's say like the
Mhm.
four Gospels. This has been my key reference. And the question that I began to ask myself is when Jesus talks about kingdom, what does that mean? That's where it started. What does kingdom mean? What does let your kingdom come? What does it mean to live in kingdom? Uh, and especially connecting it as a higher kingdom, your kingdom in heaven, like which is in a higher place, let it be manifested here. And that's where I began to realize that what he was talking about wasn't, of course, an earthly kingdom, and we know that. That's not what he wanted. He did not want to establish another earthly kingdom with power and domination and political rule and the us versus them, because Jesus was never about that. Even though the disciples were thinking, this is what he wanted to do. And the reason they thought this is what he wanted to do, because this is the prevailing consciousness that people lived in at that time. And what I mean by prevailing consciousness is the consciousness that we continue to live in as humanity for the last maybe 2, 3, 4, 5,000 years. Who knows how long? Who knows when it started? But it is a consciousness where we relate to each other through identity. As soon as you introduced me, one of the first things you said, a Palestinian, like Palestinian, American, born here, born there. My name is this. My parents are this. So we define ourselves through identity. And identity is wonderful, it's beautiful, it's colorful, it's creativity, but it's also separation. It creates us versus them. And when we create us versus them, we create potential for conflict. And when there's conflict, there's potential for violence and for war. Uh, and so Jesus was never about, and I think hopefully at least all Christians agree that he was never about an earthly kingdom the way the consciousness of the world is. And so the prevailing consciousness, I describe it, is the consciousness that is the most animate one that we live in to the point where we don't even know that we're living in it. Just like how I describe it, like a fish in water. The fish doesn't is not aware that it's living in water because water is everywhere, as far as I know. Maybe there's some other
Or
scientific
those
knowledge about
flying
that.
fish that fly out of the water and then,
Here you go. Maybe, maybe
oh,
that's
oh, no, no, anyway.
yeah. And then but they know that they could only survive in the water itself. And so I think the prevailing consciousness is what we consider as normality. This is how we are. This is how humans fight each other. Parents beat up their kids. People get divorced. The war is part of who we are. We define it as sort of human nature. And I think that at the core, this is what Jesus was challenging. He was saying, this is the moment we become aware of this consciousness, the prevailing consciousness, which I say a lot of it. Yes, there's beautiful things in it, but a lot of this prevailing consciousness is based on separation, based on hierarchy, embedded in patriarchy as a model of how we function in society, embedded in this idea of scarcity, not just scarcity in terms of material needs, but scarcity in relationships, scarcity in friendship, scarcity in love. We're always needing, needing, needing. There's always this sense of I don't have enough, embedded in fear. Most of us, all of us, live in fear of what might tomorrow bring. Do I have enough to survive? Is there going to be war? Are they going to attack us? We go to the mall, we go to somewhere, and I see somebody who is different than me. Immediately, maybe I might have fear of them. their color, their ethnicity, what they're wearing. And so fear is become a big part of, again, our system, our consciousness. And so when we look at Jesus and what he was teaching, everything he was teaching was challenging the paradigms of the consciousness that we are living in, challenging the prevailing consciousness and introducing us to a kingdom consciousness, the kingdom consciousness where everybody's invited. We're all one in our humanity. Love is the core of how we connect with each other. That once we trust the divine, once we trust the creator, look at the birds in the sky, they're not afraid of what they're going to eat tomorrow. How about you? As humans, why should we be afraid? If we live this love and compassion and care and trust with each other, then we begin to manifest a whole new consciousness within us, which is the kingdom consciousness. This is what Jesus was introducing. And so I make this point that our struggle is not in the context of what we are living in. Context changes over time. But the consciousness that we live in, the prevailing one, is what has existed for thousands of years. And we could all imagine a life without violence, a life of peace, a life of abundance. It's not a pipe dream. And so Christ wasn't talking about creating some pipe dream. He was talking about once we begin to see with new eyes, as he was saying, listen with new ears, understand, open our hearts in a space of purity to each other, um, humble in how we relate to each other, and seeking peace in a new way, seeking peace as in to shift from one consciousness to the other, then we could actually create a better world for all of us. And for me, I would say, the teachings of Jesus have been used and abused for good and for bad for 2 millennium, based on the political agenda or economic agenda or racial agenda or sexist agenda of a particular group of people. They would look into the text and say, this is what Jesus was meaning. And then this is what Jesus was meaning. And so we went everything from liberation theology as a core, as what Jesus was about, to prosperity gospel. This is what Jesus was about. To supporting war and slavery. This is what Jesus was about. To being passive and peacemakers. This is what Jesus was about. If we read the gospel through the lens of kingdom consciousness, addressing the prevailing consciousness, what I have discovered, and this is what I invite people to do, is that from the beginning to the end, this is actually the most common thing that connects everything together. That Jesus went through a process of personal transformation. This is what I define as Christ consciousness. It is me in my personal process going through a transformative process in my own consciousness. And this is like the individual journey. And then in the individual journey, the collective of the individuals is what creates the kingdom consciousness, the collective consciousness that is transformed. I hope this makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. So you define Christ consciousness as this union with the divine.
Mhm.
So I love that
Which is what we are all invited to.
too.
And this is, for me, the beauty of Jesus is that he wasn't unique. He wasn't an extraordinary entity. He was a human being that was able to understand a process. He was probably much smarter than any of us, so I'll give him that credit. He was much more centered in himself more than many of us, and I give him credit for that. But he was a person that was able to go through a process to manifest Christ consciousness within him, which is the unity becoming one with the divine.
Mhm.
That, and then he said, like, this is the point. He said to his followers, I want you to do the same. You are called to do the same. He prayed for them to have the same experience. He even told them, and this is where sometimes I had challenges in church because he said things that I really had a hard time finding any pastor to talk about. Maybe you could help me with this. When he said, "You could do greater things than what I have done."
Yeah. Yeah.
What is it like? Come on.
Yeah.
He was clear. He was clear, which means you could even attain that Christ consciousness and do even greater things because now you're working in a collective. If you follow the teachings and you manifest kingdom within you as a collective, as a community, you could even do greater things than what I have been able to do as an individual, as a person. And so he was calling us to be like him.
Mhm.
Uh, Me and the Father are one, and I pray that they are one, just like you and I are one.
Yes.
So everything about him was calling us to become Christ-like, exactly like he was.
Yeah, it wasn't a separation theology.
Definitely,
It's
definitely not.
right. It was.
Separation goes back into the prevailing
Yeah.
consciousness.
Exactly.
This
Exactly.
is what separation is about, the us and the them. And
Mhm.
he was never, never about us and them. Even when he confronted empire, even when he confronted the systems of oppression, as we said, like leading in nonviolent resistance and activism that he did firsthand, he was doing this for the sake of the oneness and unity of what we could become. He was challenging those who were abusing and taking advantage and manipulating and creating this sense of separation between the us and the them. Those are the ones that he confronted in a very, very direct way. So, yeah, he was all about unity and oneness. This is, for me, what Jesus was about.
I like to say he models the divinity of humanity, which I think is our true identity. In almost all the world religions, you could talk about, the imago Dei, and that's the image, the divinity of humanity, the image of the divine in all of us. The
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and
the
we all have
golden
it.
the golden Buddha within. If you're coming from a Buddha background, or I mean, you just go out there and it's and even in science, everything's connected, right? We're not
Yes.
separate.
Yeah, yeah, no, everything is connected.
Everything's connected.
And the divine exists within us. We are created. Even when we say we are created in God's image, it's not image this, the face,
Right.
because our face, the image, the essence. The image means the essence. We are created in the essence. So
Mhm.
we have the essence of God, the divine, within each one of us. And our journey, and this is where Jesus was important part, is to remind us and to help us return to
Yes.
our original intent
Yeah.
that the divine created us in.
The original blessing. I love that.
Original blessing. Yeah.
Mhm.
In the same way we could say it, it's returning to Eden, returning to how Adam and Eve lived in Eden, which they lived in that consciousness where everything was united and one, and they were engaging with nature as part of nature, and God was in and with them all the time. And so yeah, they were kicked out, and now we have to go back. And I think this is the journey of humanity. How do we return to our intent, our natural calling, our spiritual calling as a humanity?
Mm. And so your book, I don't want to quite jump into the Beatitudes right yet, but you're taking us towards um, Jesus's teachings that aren't just sermons, they aren't just dogmas, they aren't just a set of things that you got to believe in order to get to heaven, but a set of teachings that help us transform internally and then collectively.
Mhm. Yes.
Transformation and becoming as the key to Jesus' teaching versus dogma.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's not, he didn't provide, Sunday sermon material for us to just keep repeating. Depends on the week of the year. Is it Passover? Is it Lent? Is it Christmas? We just read these texts and do sermons about it. And then now we have like 3 weeks after this and the 12th week after this. And there's just these like set teachings that we have. Jesus was, as I said, very, very smart, intelligent. Every message was pointing and pointed and clear in terms of what he wanted the disciples to learn. And that's why he was, as I write in the book, he was teaching in the masses, and everybody was hearing them, and most people just heard it as what we call sermon material. Yeah, wow, inspiring, beautiful stories that we could tell our children. And then secretly, he would sit with his disciples and say, "Okay, what did you learn, guys?
It's good
What
stuff.
was it about?" And then they would tell him, "What did you mean? What did you mean by this parable?" And he would then explain to them, and it was always connected to kingdom.
Hmm.
Every parable that Jesus taught, every story that he said was always connected to that personal and collective transformation into Christ consciousness, what I define as Christ consciousness, and kingdom consciousness.
I did, I was working on a Hebrew PhD, and I exegeted the Genesis 1 and the image of God, image likeness stuff. And, in the ancient Near East, that was an elitist term just for the king. And here in this text, it democratizes that image with all humanity,
Yeah.
perhaps even all creation,
Yes. Exactly.
right?
I believe that. Yes.
Yeah,
100%. Yes.
yeah. And so I like the way you, on your chapter 5, you talked about the miracles as a window into, not like to prove something of Jesus's worth, but
Mhm.
as a window into uh, the healing of humanity's broken consciousness or prevailing consciousness into a new consciousness, like
Yes.
windows.
Yeah.
Might
Now,
share
again, and I say,
in the in
whether you believe in them as happening or they didn't happen, that's not the point. That
right.
is really not the point. We argue, did he do these things? Did he not do these things? The point is the essence of the story itself and how it fits into the overall collective message that Jesus was presenting. This is where the celebration for me came out. Like every, as you said, every miracle was connected to an aspect of how do we move into the new consciousness? How do we move, for example, like the feeding of the 5,000? We move from scarcity to abundance. That's the message
Mm.
of feeding the 5,000. Not that he did this. Again, if he did this, great. But the point is, let us move into abundance, that there is enough for everybody. This is what he was challenging his disciples. That's why he told them first, feed them. He wanted to see their faith. And can we understand the concept of there is enough for everybody's need? Not like Gandhi would say, everybody's not enough for everybody's greed. So the abundance, when he healed, I love this notion, and it came to me years ago when he was healing the sick, because we know, like those who that he healed, those that he raised from the dead, they probably got sick, the next year, they probably died a few years later, and so whatever sickness that he healed, or when he put the waves down in the storm, the next week there was probably another storm that killed more fishermen. So that's not the point, because if he wanted to actually stop fishermen from being killed, he would have eliminated all storms in the world in one time, and we would have never seen a storm again, right? So the message of Jesus was connected again to this shift in consciousness, shift in awareness, and to understand that we are constrained by the prevailing consciousness. And we are like imprisoned in it without knowing it. And once we become aware of it, this is where again where the miracle happens, the real miracle, then we can step out of it. For me, when Jesus was healing, he was liberating people from the constraints that did not allow them to live their life the way the divine wanted this life to be lived. If you are mentally ill, if you are physically ill, if you are emotionally ill, you're not living the fulfilled life. And this is where healing happens. It is the liberation that you engage in. And again, this is why Jesus was always asking those who he healed most of the time, what do you want?
Yes.
It is the faith in their ability to say, this is what I want, that he was waiting for them to say. It's not like, oh, I don't know what I want. You do whatever you want with me. Like, "No, I want to be healed." Just by saying I want to be healed, that means I have faith that I can transcend the situation I'm in into another one. And then he would say, your faith healed you. Just that alone in many situations, as we see in the gospel.
It's beautiful. So so very quickly after Jesus' death and resurrection, right?
Yeah.
We see, even with Peter and Paul to some degree, a shift away from maybe what was core to Jesus's teachings, right? Um, we can get, but I mean, even Paul, like, have you ever, by the way, have you ever read Stephen Patterson's book, uh, The Forgotten Creed? He was a part of the Jesus seminar. I did an interview with him. It's a really interesting read. He doesn't
I
think
definitely read it. Yeah.
he
No,
he
I
he doesn't think that the pastoral epistles of Paul actually are Paul, because even within the text of the New Testament, you see in the early in the earliest days of Paul's churches, women were leading and prophesying, and very quickly you see women being shut down, even within the
yeah.
the New Testament era, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so a number of scholars think that, how books were sometimes written in other people's names just, to get, anyway, we can get into really too deep a water
So,
there,
so
but,
I
but
just,
I,
I'm glad I'm not a theologian, and
yeah,
I'm not coming from a theological background when I say the things I do and I write the things that I do.
but the point that I'm making is that very quickly after Jesus' death and resurrection, there became a shift and and some movements away from the core teachings that Jesus was making,
Exactly, exactly. And then why haven't we stopped and paused on this and asked what happened?
Mhm.
All of a sudden, we just go into, is it Pauline doctrine or is it Peter's doctrine and the argument this and that and we lost it. We lost our compass. We lost our intention as people who are committed to following Jesus. And I write in the book that Peter and Paul probably had the best intention in the world. I'm not gonna argue
Right.
like what many people argue about their intention. Like
Yeah.
they probably loved Jesus and they probably were inspired by him. And Paul probably saw a vision in his dream or something of Jesus, and he wanted that. But again, until and unless they were able to go through their own personal transformation process in a complete way, they still had remnants of the prevailing consciousness that keeps pulling us back about power, about my truth, about making him wrong, about and again, we consider this to be natural. This is who we are. And I write, Paul's background is in a certain way that he brought his background into the teachings, and Peter brought his background into the teachings. Peter had this notion until the last days, as we know very well, that Jesus was still going to be the Messiah that's going to save the people from the Roman Empire and create the kingdom. Even the disciples, with
Yeah.
everything that Jesus taught them, that's how embedded they were in that consciousness
Mhm.
that they couldn't even they went many steps, but they couldn't get the whole thing.
Yeah.
And when Jesus left, they kind of fell back, and it was now about how do we maintain,
Mhm.
how do we control, how do we spread the message. And salvation became a key component actually at that time after Jesus. It wasn't during the times of Jesus, that whole concept of salvation. It came after. So for me, yeah, Peter and Paul, uh, how to say, they messed things up a bit, and then once you start building a building, and the foundation could be straight, but once you start building it tilted, and then the whole thing goes into that direction.
Yeah, and then of course you bring out, of course, when you hit Constantine, then we have a whole new thing. Like, where now the thing that Jesus birthed that was in nonviolent resistance to empire becomes empire and becomes the new oppressor.
It's really amazing, and
So all of a sudden, the Christian church and Christian, all the way down to today, with all the Christian nationalist movements around the world right now, including America, and
especially,
Hungary, and yeah, right. It's like
yeah,
all of a
no,
sudden, empire and Christianity
yeah.
are the opposite of Jesus.
They are fully the opposite of Jesus. This is for me maybe This was the straw that broke the camel's back in a way. What happened during Constantine's era, the Nicene Creed, and all of this, bringing all of these again men, patriarchal heads of churches, followers, following them, honoring them together to agree or threaten them if they don't agree. It's going to not be good for them. And at the end of the day, they had to compromise and reach some agreement to please him because he wanted to be the empire of this new thing. And that is where really things went completely off track. Because until then, you still have remnants of communities. And this is what Jesus was about.
Hmm.
It was about community,
Hmm.
people coming together. The early church, as we know very well, was really about communities coming together, supporting each other, loving each other, holding each other in prayer, fasting with each other, caring for each other who had, gave those who didn't have. And that's actually what led to the growth of the early church. The growth of the early church was led by people seeing a group of people that were so dedicated to each other, so loving each other, that they were saying, I want to be part of this. I want to be part of this.
Hmm.
If I was hungry, I would go to them and they would feed me. So I want to be part of this.
Hmm.
And they were like any of us want to be with a group of people that are just beautiful and loving each other and caring for each other. But then it becomes an institution that we need to protect because, of course, Rome did not like what was happening, so they started attacking them. They were shaking, rattling, the foundation of empire. And so the moment you start attacking them, then all of a sudden we need to protect ourselves. And this is again where the doctrine of sacrifice, as Jesus sacrificed himself, we need to sacrifice for the sake of the church and for each other. People, because followers of Jesus, I'm not even going to call them Christians, followers of Jesus were being killed at that time. And now it just became you are getting killed for following Jesus. This is what the empire was about. It wasn't about because you were living a certain way that was challenging us. Just because now you claim to be a Christian, you will die. And so the term Christianity became now embedded in the definition of being persecuted or not. And so, yeah, and that really where we started going astray. And then a few hundred years later, of course, the empire really takes it over and puts Jesus on a pedestal and say, okay, this guy, you just worship him, you just believe in him, or even you're born into Catholicism, that's good enough. You're born into Orthodoxy, that's good enough. If not, convert and believe in him, and that's all you have to do. And the teachings just become, again, as we said before, inspirational sermon texts just to fill our Sundays with and celebrate Easter and Christmas and different Lent and different things. And it's really sad. I mean, like, I don't say this with any resentment or bigotry. I say this with the compassion of wanting people to just reclaim Christ and the
Hmm.
consciousness that he was teaching us and just to like look let's look at the teachings. Let us read the teachings, let us study the teachings, let us live the teachings. If we go to church and the pastor says, instead of giving tithes, again, money to the church, I want everybody to do this and this and this as part of what Christ taught us to do. And you come next week and you report on what you did. Uh, and creating, again, that shift in consciousness where the church is in service to humanity.
Hmm.
The church is the place where community meets.
Hmm.
The church is the place where the doors are open 24/7. Imagine just these simple things, how things would be different. This is exactly what Jesus was about. So I think we agree to say that if Jesus appeared today, he would be quite disappointed, to say
Hmm.
the least, of what has become of his image and his teachings.
Yeah. 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 So the you that we kind of covered part one of your book right here. I mean, that was and then part two, you dive into the Beatitudes, which yeah, I loved your you can imagine I've been teaching the Bible for a while, Sammy, for close to 5 decades, and but I
You're not that
loved
old.
your I loved your take on the Beatitudes, and particularly you saw them as one building on the next, building on the next, building on the next. So from the poor to mourning to
Yeah.
meekness to justice to mercy and then to peacemaking. And then what
Yeah,
happens when you're a true peacemaker is that you get a little
yeah, pushed
persecution
around.
going on
You
there.
get
Yeah.
pushed around. Exactly.
But yeah, I really enjoyed your take on each of the beatitudes. Starting off with vulnerability, poverty
Yeah.
of spirit, or
So,
humbleness, a surrender or a letting go of everything that our prevailing consciousness used to tell us, our ego used to tell us, all those separation, dominance, control, fear, dominant, and we let go of all of that to begin with. And
yeah.
it's a letting go, surrender of vulnerability, and that's the beginning. It's a it,
So let me tell you the story
yeah.
behind the Beatitudes. Because the Beatitudes were actually the first teachings that I connected with in the deepest way, and as you said, ways that we don't learn or teach in churches or even in seminaries. So I was actually on a red-eye flight from our friend Rick Malouf in Phoenix, Arizona, going to Chicago uh, to speak in Willow Creek Church at that time.
Oh wow.
And they had, I was on a speaking tour, and they had invited me to give a talk. I think they were doing a series on the Beatitudes, and they had invited me to give a talk. I think it was on meekness. Blessed are the meek.
Okay.
And I was quite upset, to be honest. I'm a peacemaker. I'm a nonviolent activist. Give me the one that I know about. Blessed are the peacemakers. I'm good. I'm good in that one.
Yeah.
And like meek, I don't even know what the word meekness is. What does even the word meekness mean? Like, why are you like? And so I actually asked Rick to give me a Bible to take with me because the Bible has references and translations and where meekness comes in the Old Testament and other because I needed to create a sermon
Little
about it.
study Bible. Yeah, yeah.
So I'm sitting on this red-eye flight. I'm having the Bible in front of me, and I'm like falling, like reading it, reading the Beatitudes, falling asleep as I'm reading it, and then going over and then reading them, and then I start over from the beginning, and I read them, and then all of a sudden, wait a minute, there's something here. There is something profound here. These are not just, I guess, in that state of half asleep, half awake, conscious and not conscious. It came to me very strong that. Yeah, I'm going to call it a Paulinian experience on a flight, on a red-eye flight, where they are connected to each other. The Beatitudes until that point and the way we teach them now are individual blessings for people who are having a certain experience. And because they're having that experience, they will be blessed, which doesn't make sense a lot. And Jesus doesn't have anything else where he's teaching or preaching in sort of like this PowerPoint one line bumper stickers. Um, that and he starts the Sermon on the Mount, which is his main, what many of us call his inaugural speech, his launch speech, with this. So it is the outline for the rest of the sermon, which is the outline for the rest of his teachings and his way of life. And so when I began to read this, I'm like, wow, he is actually calling us into poverty. He is actually calling us to mourn, to bring to death and to mourn the past so that we could let go of our attachment. He's calling us into meekness and humbleness. He's calling us into righteousness, which is this sort of what I would call sacred justice, a collective sense of justice. He's calling us to become merciful. He's calling us to become pure in heart. He's calling us to be peacemaker. He's calling us to be all of these things. And that was the revelation for me. That was the turning point where my life began to change. And that is actually what led me to reread the gospel in a different way and to see that Jesus actually went through poverty. From the moment he was born in poverty. And then in his life, he went through all of these steps. And I write about them in the book where at the end he engaged in peacemaker. He engaged in his last days, what he did in the temple in Jerusalem by turning over the tables, by by exposing and dismantling empire, he was creating the resistance, the nonviolent resistance to the empire itself. And that is when you get the next one after that. What happens to a peacemaker? You will be persecuted. And he was telling them this. He was warning them. It wasn't just about prophesizing his what will happen to him. The peacemakers will be persecuted for the peacemaking they do because they challenge the systems and the structures. And if we go to a spiritual level, the consciousness
Mm.
that exists. And now I tell people, if you're not persecuted for being a peacemaker, you're not a peacemaker. You're not doing peacemaking good enough. Um, and of course, after persecution comes the next one,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is celebrate.
Yes.
There is the celebration in persecution. And this is what I love Jesus, because again, in the prevailing consciousness, if I'm poor, I am desperate, I am needy. I'm like, no, if you're poor, this is good for you. If you're mourning, this is even better for you. If you're humble, if you're meek and humble, being meekness is not a good word in our sort of
Yeah.
language. No, he's like, no, become this, become this, become this, become this. This is how, and the journey of the Beatitudes is the journey of attaining Christ consciousness
Yeah. I love
at
that.
an individual level. And then you go into the collective with the kingdom
Yeah.
consciousness.
Sammy, it's so beautiful. We don't have time to keep just diving into this, but I you have embodied peacemaking with your enemies your whole life.
Hmm.
I mean, in a way
Right.
that, like in a way that I mean, I only can relate to it because I know you and I've heard you tell stories, and I know you a little bit. But I mean, you have embodied this, and you have I know you have hundreds of stories of how you have engaged your enemy in the way that you're talking about here. Can you share a closing example one of your stories of that would embody what this,
So,
and because I know you have so many, but you've done it in so many different ways. I mean, I've heard you tell dozens of stories about engaging your enemy in peacemaking,
yeah.
like your enemy that wants to kill you, that has stoned you, that have you been put in jail. You've done. I mean,
Yeah.
I've never been put in jail for this stuff.
So you're not a good peacemaker.
I know.
Come on.
You need
What
to
are, what
help.
are you doing?
I need to start hanging out with you more, man.
Come on, Fred.
I know.
Um, but before I share a story, I want to share also some very powerful insight that I got also in writing this book,
Okay.
which is even the peacemaking that I was doing, where I was also feeling that I was following the teachings of Jesus, was still missing a big component of what he was teaching. Because as you read in the book, I talk about content, context, and consciousness. And the peacemaking that most of us do is within a contextual situation between Palestinians and Israelis, between Ukrainians and Russians, between white and black, between men and women, and it's very contextual. And what I began to understand, and then this is where my journey now I can say is beginning, is that Jesus was yes and 100% to resist the systems of oppression and injustice, but not for the sake of creating an earthly peace, not for the sake of creating what we define as Pax Romano, which is again part of the prevailing consciousness that we have been living in for 2000 years, which is a peace that is fragile, built on fear, and can collapse anytime. I'm in Europe now. I'm in Poland, and I'm talking to people in Poland about the book, and I'm sharing with them about, Poland after the Second World War. You thought it was over, everything was fine, it's done, peace. We have the European Union, we have NATO, we have all of this. Look at us. And all of a sudden, this year, last 2 years, 3 years, people in Poland are afraid that they're going to get bombed by Russia. So what is this peace? And so Jesus is pushing us to even a greater ability than what we think we can handle. that he was pushing us not just for a peace, which is about political agreements and ending violence. He was pushing us for the greatest peace that we can attain, which is the kingdom consciousness, the kingdom of God being manifested, the kingdom of the sacred being manifested. And so I want to share that in all of my experience that I had, I am very proud and honored to have also been a peacemaker, but there is a peacemaker that is greater than the peacemaking that we think we can achieve in our world,
Mm,
which is really the peace that really brings an end to all violence, to
mm,
all separation, to all division, to all poverty, to all illness. This is the consciousness that Christ is inviting us to. Uh, so for me, maybe this is enough to share like as a story because yes, I've had experiences, and I will share that even in this moment, as Palestinians, a genocide, when hundreds and thousands of Palestinians are being killed on a daily basis. I believe that this is the reason these conflicts in their core happen because we are still stuck in this consciousness of separation, of one group of people thinking they are better, one group of people thinking that the land is theirs while others don't have any rights in it. This is the consciousness that we are in. And for me, yes, I will continue to resist through nonviolence, the oppression and the violence that we are experiencing as Palestinians and seeking peace with those who are doing this to us. But I will also keep inviting myself to push further and to say there is a greater peace that we can attain than just reaching a political settlement or a political agreement.
boy. Yeah. I mean, boy, I don't even know how to put into words the emotion I have at this moment.
Mm.
But I mean, having been with you in the West Bank, having walked through checkpoints with you, having teenagers with machine guns uh, treat you like a non-human. Um, I've watched that stuff, and but then like just this past week in America, you have this basically a podcaster who has been trying to build a a Christian nation in America with a right wing ideology about what Christianity is all about, and he gets shot and killed, and then the reverberations of that in American culture right now, and then the doubling down on dominance and control. Oh, well, we're gonna go after our enemies and
Yeah.
silence them and shut them up and use political force to quiet them, and all the. It's just the history of the prevailing consciousness as you've talked about, and honestly, I mean, I have the same heart, and I still find myself just going, what in the heck do I do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, as an American, I grieve the hatred and the violence because I know humans now. I've lived long enough. I know Ukrainians. I know Russians. I'm doing a podcast in my basement. I have a Russian living right next door to me, who
Hmm.
immigrated here. I've I know people who are Trump supporters. I know people who are, I mean, I know every kind of person. I know Israelis and Palestine, and I know, and I want love, and I want what you're talking about so much in my heart, right? And I think, I mean, don't we all, humans at our best, want the kind of peace that we long for this stuff. I
100%.
Oh my God. And then, yeah.
It is fear. It is the fear and the separation that we have been pushed in for hundreds and thousands of years.
Mm.
Narratives and stories of identity that have separated us from each other. And Jesus challenges the concept of identity, as I write about in the book itself.
Yeah.
And there's so much, like, if we, again, this is why for me,
Mm.
learning from the rabbi, learning from the teacher. learning from a person who embedded peacemaking in his life, who transformed himself and taught us, gave us the tools, gave us the steps.
Mm,
Like, this is the beauty of it. The gospel is the guide on how do we achieve everything that you're saying we want. And it's not going to be easy. Empires
mm,
are empires and they want to protect themselves and they will continue to push separation and fear and divide and conquer between us and the economic elite and the power and the poor and so on. But again, the teaching is there.
mm,
The teaching is there. And the more people that I really hope read, and it's not for the sake of the book. I mean, don't forget the book. Just read
mhm.
the gospel that everybody has in their home with new eyes and
Yeah,
listen to it with new ears. And let us come together and create what Jesus wanted to do, a
yeah,
movement, a movement. This is what he wanted his followers to do, to create, not to create an institution, not to create an empire, to create a what we would call a grassroots movement of people living his teachings.
mm,
And maybe the time has come. Maybe the time has come for us to actually do this. This is where we have reached in our humanity that it is desperate enough where maybe we can awaken into this new consciousness.
mm. Well, my prayers are with you. And as we wrap this up, where do people find you? Of course, they find your book on Amazon, The Sacred Awakening, Reclaiming Christ Consciousness. But the work that you're doing with Nonviolence International, I noticed you mentioned the guy that does the nonlinear training.
Yes.
I'm curious. I think there might be people who would want like classes to in this some deeper training in this.
Yeah.
I found myself going, gosh, I wasn't even familiar with the nonlinear. So I've done the nonviolence communication. I've done circle. Again, I've done a number of different kinds of things that. Uh, but you understand what I'm saying? Like
Yeah, yeah,
deeper
yeah.
training in this. And I know you've been training people a long time in peacemaking. But what are some practical ways that mostly Americans are going to be listening to this? I got some European listeners and a few other people scattered
Great.
around the globe, but a lot of Americans are listening right now. From
So part of me joining Nonviolence International is a platform for me to do these trainings that we're talking about. So I do online training. I actually just completed a couple months ago an online training in nonlinear thinking,
okay.
and participants from all around the world came, and it was very transformative, very amazing for them. And so we'll announce more of these trainings in nonviolence, in nonlinear thinking, and in collective trauma healing, which is again very important. This is again Jesus, what he did was healing.
Mhm.
And so we need to heal and we need to transform and we need to resist.
Mhm.
These are the three components: nonviolence, nonlinear for transformation, and healing to liberate us from the past.
Mm.
And so, as an organization, we are doing these things and we will be doing them online. And of course, I'm always happy to be invited in person to come and do trainings in
Mm.
Kansas City or
Yeah.
wherever in the world that I'm called to, because
Yeah.
this is the mission that we are about. And so people can go to nonviolenceinternational.net or send an email to info@nonviolenceinternational.net, and I will respond to them and we'll connect from there. And they could join our mailing list, so whenever there is online trainings, they could register for them and be part of it.
Yeah.
And then part of what we will be doing as well, and I'll be doing is also taking the book and developing what I hope would be a transformative course where people can, as a retreat, where people can really be in a process. What does it mean to become poor in spirit in my journey,
Mm.
in my experience? What are the things that I have to mourn in my life, to let go of, to bury behind me so that I can open my heart for something new? Because if I'm not mourning the past, it's still stuck in me. I
Mm.
still have this expectation. What does it mean to be humble
Mm.
in my experience? What does it mean to be a peacemaker
Mm.
in my community? And so one of the things we're looking into developing is also a way to create spaces for people to learn this. But as I said, it's not about the book, it's not about the course, it's just about us seeing Jesus. differently than what we have been seeing him for the last 2,000 years. That's what's important for me.
Beautiful. Well, I want you to, offline, you can give me some recommendations for how I can because I still love what you're doing and love you and what you stand for and your heart and everything. So anyway, yeah, so we'll put that in the show notes of our podcast, and people can click on those links and get to, because I've signed up for, I get the emails from the Nonviolent International, and very beautiful. Thank you so much.
And I'm happy for people to be in direct contact with me through the info at Nonviolence International about the book, questions, process they want to engage in. We want to be in service. We want to be in service for humanity, and so we are here. We are here for that.
We need to get you to Kansas City because you got family here anyway, right? So,
well, the Chiefs better win their next game, or else I'm not coming. Please,
yeah, right? Okay.
It's the Giants, right?
It's the Giants, yeah. Yeah, I won't dive into that. I could.
Yeah. No,
we could do commentary on the Chiefs right now, but
yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate you, Fred. I want you to know this and your heart and your journey. And I think one thing that is in common between us is that we're always in the question. And you have been one that's always in the question, always seeking, and not just finding some place where you say, this is it. And I more just people do the things you do, just be in the question and not just satisfied with whatever answer. Let's go deeper and deeper. And this is what you do. So I really honor you for what you do as well for this world.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's more about falling apart right now and then trying to, and then I question everything. And then, I like to say I'm less certain and more open, right? That's kind of my new mantra right now.
That's the first blessing, letting go of everything.
Exactly, right? It's it.
Becoming pure in spirit. Exactly.
It's it. For sure. Yeah. All those degrees, all that ministry, all of that. Yeah. But now I'm like, what do I know? I don't know.
There you go. It's jumping into meekness as well. So you're doing it.
Yeah.
And humbleness. Yes.
Yeah.
It's happening. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. All right. Hope to see you soon.
Take care. Very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. See you next time. Hey, you made it to the end. Thanks for listening all the way through on this episode. By the way, if you're not already a supporter, go to spiritualityadventures.com, sign up for one of our monthly supports, and you will receive our bonus content. You'll receive lots of interesting information about our guests. Many of our musicians will do special bonus songs and record a song. So I want to encourage you to do that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Be sure and subscribe. Be sure and share any of the episodes that you like. And be sure and make comments if you like them as well. This helps us get Spirituality Adventures out there to more listeners, more watchers. So whatever platform you're using, subscribe, like, share, make comments, and go to our website, sign up for our team, and be a part of the team support. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.